Ooh, that's loud. Welcome back to Let's Play Trails in the Sky. Last time, uh, we read chapters 1 through 6 of Carnelia. And today we're going to read chapters 7 through 11. The death of a friend. Wheezing, I breathed in, the sound high and whistling as the air fought to make it through my constricted windpipe. Still clutching tightly to my arm, I unwound the sheets from my throat. Utterly exhausted, I tilted my head on its side and watched with threatened eyes as a small stream of saliva dribbled down over the edge of my mouth and pooled onto the floor. When fresh air finally made its way into my lungs, it initially choked me nearly as badly as the sheet had. A thump from somewhere behind startled me from my fit. The Jaeger demoness, like a spring-loaded doll, leaped up from the floor of the room. The single shot of magic I had previously landed in her gut should have done the trick, but the fluid way she moved about made it appear as if she were unfazed by the blast. Within arm's reach of where I had subconsciously curled myself came the spluttering sound of unseasoned wood being hewn down by a giant woodcutter's axe. In the following instant, Sister Carnelia came flying through a newly opened hole in the timber door, her entry punctuated by a cloud of splinters. Her arm as pliant as whip, she passed by the female Jaeger in a lightning-quick motion, with a turning assault clocked her opponent full tilt in the face. The woman spun with the force of the blow and fell with a tumultuous thud, her head cracking hard against the floor. Like a prima ballerina, Sister Carnelia raised her knee high until she had it tucked securely up against her sternum. She stared down at the outstretched figure on the floor. Muscles flexed, and without an ounce of mercy, Sister Carnelia let her judgment fall with the heel of her boot stomping down and crushing the wretched woman's throat. As I witnessed the grotesque and unsightly scene, Sister Carnelia gave a quick glance in my direction and beckoned me on. Then, with a nimble hop into the unknown before her, she cleared the broken window frame and laid to the ground below. Quickly scraping my belongings together, I made after her in the same manner as she had left, out the window with the two-story drop to the cobblestone side road below. Waiting close by and helping to break my less than elegant fall, Sister Carnelia led me on as we took flight along the avenue, brightly lit by the morning sun. A deafening blare from an orbital engine's whistle indicated that the first train was about to depart. Sister Carnelia immediately pulled a ticket from out of her coat pocket and held it out to me from the side. Reaching for the floating slip of paper between her fingers, I realized I was still carrying the bar of soap from before, so I chucked it, not caring where it landed or who it might hit. Aboard the train, the smoggy haze from the incessant smoking of the nattering gentleman had permeated into every nook and cranny of the passenger car. There was also the smell of newly printed publications and the occasional sound of someone clearing their throat. It felt rather awkward to have boarded a train bound for the Imperial City with my bag still in hand. "Do you know what your problem is, Toby?" Sister Carnelia remarked. "You're just like that ornament of yours." Using her white handkerchief, she stanched the flow of blood from my leg, which had been lacerated by the spinning arrow blades of the magic. "Once you get yourself into trouble, you keep digging yourself in deeper until someone comes along with a billy club and whacks some good sense into you." Placing the full magazine on my lap, she tapped on it with the nailed tip of her index finger, indicating that I should read what was inside. It was a copy of the Imperial Chronicle, which had been published just that morning. A several-line article buried pages behind more titillating news told of the suspicious death of one orbital factory owner somewhere within the capital. This was the first time I had ever become aware of Mick's real age. Sister Carnelia continued her lecture as she mercilessly upbraided me for my reckless behavior. "Miss being caught up in all of this by a hair's breadth," she informed me coolly. At a loss for words over the shock of Mick's death, I put the magazine away in my trench coat pocket. "Another 5 minutes in that shop, and you would have gone to meet your maker too." I shook my head with trembling lips, let my thoughts fumble out of my mouth. "I just don't get it. Why did Mick have to die?" Images of Mick's cold body behind the counter alternated in my mind with that lump of metal wrapped in scrap paper. What the hell had I been carrying all this up, and why did anyone have to die over it? I pondered at length. Sister Carnelia met my eyes and held them. "Because it's an artifact," she said simply. "An artifact?" I scoffed as I blew off her answer. "It's not like I haven't carried a bunch of them before." Artifacts, in short, were the remaining legacy of an ancient civilization and the generic term for any unidentifiable mechanism which resembled that of an organ. I had spent my days as a courier smuggling any number of those items under the false pretense that the goods I was carrying were nothing more than rare antiques and readily placed them in the hands of those aristocrats amongst whom were especially in vogue. For the most part, my current possession appeared as though it had belonged in the same group as others. Personally, I could find no other value in the collecting of these artifacts besides the indulgence of oneself in a decadent hobby. Chiding me as if I were a clueless child, Sister Carnelia rebuked. "You're wrong, Toby. This one's much different than the others." After a moment's pause, she added, "It's alive." Unable to grasp what she had meant, I looked at her with a questioning expression on my face. Sister Carnelia tried again. "What I'm trying to tell you is that it still works, although I'm not really sure what kind of power it actually has. It was unearthed during an excavation within the Empire's territory about 30 years ago." Sister Carnelia's subsequent story about the peculiar lump of metal told me of the dark history surrounding a group of aristocrats who relentlessly sought after it. The artifact itself had transitioned from hand to hand by those in power as one after another they were murdered while slumbering in their bedchambers. Then at the end of the Hundred Days' War, their whereabouts were said to have been lost. "Strangely enough, it finally turned up in the capital after all this time," she said, finishing up the account. An announcement chimed in the passenger car, notifying those arriving of the scheduled time of arrival. Sister Carnelia uncrossed and recrossed her long legs. The one who was after that artifact hired that Jaeger Corps to bring it to them, whatever the cost. So as a result, I was dispatched by the church in order to protect both you and it from falling into their hands. I sat staring down at the bag resting next to my feet as we approached our destination, and the moving train quietly began to lose speed. In the bowels of the Imperial City. Moving purposefully through the crowd, we made our way between the rows of seats. Each time swinging the swinging bag in hand stripped the side of my knee, I became keenly aware of its presence. It was an unnerving feeling, quite like I had unintentionally brushed up against someone in an offensive way. Furthermore, it was nearly inconceivable to my mind that the ancient relic that Jaeger Corps were pursuing with such a frenzy was sitting right here inside the stitched cloth of this cheap handbag. What a fool Bicht had been. Hadn't he known the burden this object would bring would be one of far more weighty than the both of us could ever hope to bear? I squeezed my eyes shut against the thoughts flowing around my mind and addressed Sister Carnelia, who followed closely behind me. "Will we be making a break for the cathedral once we get off?" "Yes, that was the plan," she answered, scanning the scene outside the window of the passenger car. "I think that's the only option we've got if you want to make it through this day alive." The station where the train was set to arrive was unremittingly crowded with countless droves of passengers. As usual, the sky was slightly overcast. Everyone outside on the platform stood shivering in silence with the collars drawn up to their ears, huddling close to one another for warmth, like a flock of waterfowl out on the tidelands in midwinter. "Don't worry, I won't be tossing you down a flight of stairs this time, Toby," jested Sister Carnelia. "Although if there were two more of you at my disposal, I might have decided otherwise," she added. Evidently, the numbers in our welcome party this time had seen a rather dramatic increase. "Odds don't appear to be in our favor," she said in a low voice, her warm breath tickling the lobe of my ear. "We won't be able to leave through the ticket gate." As soon as we stepped off the train, we stealthily moved to the opposite end of the platform, and after sneaking out a large door only authorized station personnel, we jumped down onto the path of railroad ties and steel rails below. The biting cold wind of the capital swept freely across the unobstructed railroad tracks, causing me to shudder as it ruffled our coats with its chilly touch. Slipping between the couplers of a pair of freight cars, we moved cautiously along their edge, sticking close to the shadows. Over on the cargo platform, workers were busy unloading containers. For someone who had his mindset on becoming a dealer of pilfered goods, gaining illicit entry into the station house would be one of the first of all basics. Showing my ticket, I spoke politely to one of the workers. Then with the scenario picked out in my head, I sold it to him as I played the part of a manager here on business, with a celebrity of notable repute. Midway through our conversation, I introduced Sister Carnelia, who did her best to show the man a glamorous smile and feminine pose. I had possibly gone a bit overboard when I say that she was an opera singer, because the way that she carried herself made her look more akin to a low-wage sell song in a bar of drunkards. Yet in spite of it all, the worker graciously let us through. "You're so good at that, it's almost scary, Toby," Sister Carnelia said as we raced through the station's warehouse sector. "You should seriously consider doing another job," she went on. "I bet you're going to tell me to join the Bracer Guild, right?" "Come on, those guys would turn me down in a heartbeat," I said as I laughed off the thought. Then throwing the idea back in her court, I asked, "So how about yourself? Why don't you join the Bracer Guild?" Reaching the end of the warehouse sector, we came to a stop in front of a large chain-link fence. Sister Carnelia crouched down and, while sliding a drainage cover to the side, laughed at my previous question as if it were insane. "Are you kidding?" she asked. They'd gunned me down the second I set foot into one of their branches. The winding narrow stone tunnels like the one we ran in were everywhere beneath the capital. We crawled along as the light shining down through the drainage grates on the side of the large road above us illuminated the way like a trail of flickering orbital lampposts. The feet of those walking along the avenue passed right by where we were, but not a single person was scraping our way along below them. For some strange reason or another, the world just beyond the thin flagstone-paved road appeared so dazzling in my eyes Yet the Jaeger Corps, lost with the artifact in hand and a senseless sun death, all of which had never crossed my mind before, lay in wait for me. Dared I to venture to the open world above? As we pressed on, I began to think that the small round tunnel which we were crawling through would run on forever. When it finally merged with the high-ceilinged sewer surrounded by walls of countless blocks of chiseled stone. We'll go through here and make our way over to where the cathedral is located, Sister Carnelia insisted. Raising one brow, she pointed her finger upward. It's a lot safer down here than it is up there. That's fine, all, but what are we going to do if it gets attacked? Sister Carnelia grabbed my hand and with that stepped into my darkness beyond. Don't worry, Toby, she reassured me. Faith isn't the only thing supporting the church. Carnelia. The flicker of dying orbital lamps mounted at equidistant lengths along the sewer wall sent thin streaks of light across the surface of the rippling flow of filthy sewage. Passing in front of these one by one, Sister Carnelia sped down the stone sidewalk as the sound of her body cutting through the racing tunnels winds trailed out behind her. Panting and out of breath, I continued to move my feet toward the darkness, which lay before me as I chased after Sister Carnelia's flickering shadow. Wayward, yet without a moment of repose, we headed unrelentingly with our sights set on the Cathedral of the Septian Church. We moved swiftly across the moss-covered stone pavement, the clacking of our heels echoing in the dimly lit underground. Above ground, the walking distance on the city roads from the railway station to the cathedral is about 3 blocks. If we made our way up through the drainage ditch just beyond the sluice gate, we would find ourselves in the public square outside the massive sanctuary. Up ahead, the light of another opal lamp came into view. Turning head in my direction without words, Sister Carnelia extended her right hand outward in a wide motion, indicating that we were turning that way at the next corner. Then, as if preparing for sun, she rolled both shoulders in a grinding motion, and relieved the last of her tension with the pop of the neck. It seemed to me as though she knew all too well what was lurking within the tenebrous conduit ahead. Under the unsteady and sporadic coruscation of light, the body of Sister Carnelia surged around the corner and disappeared from view. 1, 2, 3 went the walloping echoes, followed by the sound of some being whirled into the channel of filthy sludge. As I turned the corner, the first things which leapt into my sight were the contorted figures of 2 men on the ground, whom I barely missed treading on. Sister Carnelia, who was by this time several steps ahead, continued to run at her usual pace as if nothing had happened during the preceding seconds. "It's Carnelia!" came an angry but noticeably wavering voice from behind. I glanced to my rear to locate its source, and there I found a man who had dragged himself from the fecal-filled liquid, now lying next to its dead comrades, yelling with his dying breath as blood leaked out of his open mouth. "Carnelia, she's down here!" he managed to croak, before falling silent and still. Still, Sister Carnelia paid no attention nor made any effort to look back. I turned my face forward and followed her example. The walls of the conduit leading directly to the sluice gate squared out into an ominous mouth of darkness, seemingly waiting for its next unsuspecting meal. Sister Carnelia gradually slowed her pace to match and had by this time become completely exhausted and out of breath. "Looks like these guys are dead serious about getting their hands on that item this time," she said as she focused her eyes on the darkness before us. "So were those men old friends of yours or something?" I inquired. Sister Carnelia turned to face me with her dark and scarlet eyes. "Is that what you heard from those racers the other day?" she asked. I nodded and questioned her no further. With head slightly turned down, I forced myself onward, eyes fixed on the tips of my boots. Unexpectedly, Sister Carnelia opened her mouth and said, "Do you remember that woman you had a run-in with back at the inn?" I nodded slightly. "The whole reason I gave up my life as a mercenary is because I didn't want to meet a tragic end like that," she continued. "A life of no meaning, forgotten by all." I looked up at Sister Carnelia and, seeing a slight show of emotion inside of her face, heard her repeat the same line of words a few times more before finishing her thought. "I'm going to cash in my life ships, and I think it's best I fight for someone worth fighting for. At least that way I'd be able to leave a legacy of my existence behind." Taking in her words, I ran steadily beside her as if I felt a sort of nondescript apprehension slowly began to creep over me. During the short intervals between breaths, it suddenly seemed as if I were hearing the faint sound of sloshing water from behind, which caused me to prick up my ears and turn my head in its direction. "So you noticed it too, huh, Toby?" Sister Carnelia slowed her stop until finally coming to its complete stop. "They've blockaded us from behind, so there's no turning back now," she said, the direness of our situation heavy in her voice. We had arrived at an intersection where the conduit were in, and another cross passed, and just beyond the wide fetid flow of sewage water before us, I could see the dimly lit sluice gate. I placed my back against the damp bricks of the nearest wall and for a moment tried to catch my breath. "They're probably lying in wait for us," Sister Carnelia assessed stolidly, after glaring across the flowing sewage of the merged channel, and then turning her head to the rear and narrowing her eyes again. "And unfortunately, this time we won't be able to circumvent them." With the sound of composure revealing her utmost resolve, Sister Carnelia took in a few deep breaths. I laid hand on my ornament, gripping it in the palm of my sweaty hand, and then wrapped the strap of my bag securely around my opposite wrist. As always, Sister Carnelia checked her boots before standing upright. Then, taking a few step backs and holding my breath, I raced forward and darted into the Stygian flow of waste. The last stand. Sister Carnelia made such haste that she aimed for the path on the opposite side of the sludge-filled channel that I could have sworn she was actually running on the liquid surface, based on my observation of the minuscule spatters her feet produced. And of course she passed by me in the blink of an eye, the space growing wider and wider between us as I continued to charge my way through the filthy mud. Flashes of magic erupted from the darkness by the sluice gate and ripped through the air in rapid succession, but none of them could overtake the speed at which Sister Carnelia moved. An unyielding offensive by the shadowed aggressor, the settled flitulence in the depths of the channel was thrown up in the form of a powerful tsunami, and in the instant before clearing myself from its destructive path, I feared that the terrible wall of sedimented filth would crush me under its weight and bring me to an unsightly end. With a mid-air spin to avoid the last of the oncoming magic, Sister Carnelia flew to the opposite side of the channel with incredible speed, hurdling the wall of piled-up sandbags behind which the attacker still covered. She whirled her arms in a ferocious onslaught. One by one, like a row of pins being struck by a weighted object, the line of standing Jaegers crumbled to the ground. Sister Carnelia's attacks were like a whirlwind of death, blurry with the speed at which they struck. They came in advancing at inconceivable angles, puncturing throats, slashing open arteries, and then they were gone. So it's that when I finally reached the cobbled path beyond the stagnant channel, not a soul was left standing besides Sister Carnelia and myself. The cathedral is at the end of a ladder just beyond the gate, she indicated as she flicked dripping blood from her fingers like a child who forgot a handkerchief to dry her wet hands. Her eyes shone with the afterglow of battle. The Jaegers can't be far behind, so we'd better hurry, she warned. As if to punctuate her warning, the damp sound of numerous feet kicking bar as they advanced toward her present location had now become clearly audible to my ears. Stepping over the handful of Jaeger corpses lying scattered about behind the wall of sandbags, we made our way for the dry bed channel which lay ahead of us. I placed my hands on the slightly damp stone floor of the empty channel and crawled through the half-open door of the sluice gate. A falling water droplet struck the nape of my neck as I passed through the cramped opening, causing me to stop dead in my tracks. The moment that I followed, I recognized the sound of an ornament overhead on the charge of discharging a burst of magic. "Toby!" came the sensible voice of Sister Carnelia as my vision was instantly flooded with a wave of exceeding brightness. Then in the midst of the swirl of blinding light came the hand of a savior which grabbed me firmly by the shoulder. The powerful feeling of being dragged in the explosion produced by magic rupturing the stone were almost simultaneous. As the booming roar swept across the whole of my body, I was thrown backwards toward the ground. Despite my clouded vision, I managed to somersault before landing in the prone position. Choking on the filthy puddle I had fallen face down in, I lifted my head in time to see a cloud of blackened dust being heaved from the mouth of the halfway raised sluice gate door. And as if my worst nightmare had now become reality, I watched as one after another the blockading Jaegers emerged from the smoky cloud, each bearing a glinting blade. I floundered about in the slippery mud and watched as the ranks sprang into action and closed in, their rugged facial features now visible to my eyes. Instantly rolling to the side, I unsheathed my hand blade as I attempted to deflect a wide arcing slash of another with my bag. The cloth of the bag over which the sharp edge ran split open without sound, and the paper-wrapped ornament fell into the cobbled floor. Frantically, I searched for the ornament at my side, but I was unable to get a grip on it because of my clumsy, pain-stricken state. One of the mercenary men, his eyes intent on my throat, drew back his long sword to end my life. But before he could make his move, a dark silhouette appeared from behind him. It was Sister Carnelia. Her hands, moving with such finesse, disarmed the man in an instant, and left his sword behind him before he was launched from view into the hanging shadows veiling the dark conduit. As the sound of the falling sword struck the ground with a high-pitched clink, Sister Carnelia dropped to her knees. Her soft whispered words were full of regret. "I'm sorry, Toby." With her head bowed forward, I watched in disbelief as several streaks of blood began to run down the side of her face. "It looks like the goddess may be calling you home too," she said gently. Once again, Sister Carnelia rose to her feet, her coat hanging in tatters. Eyeing her outer garment's ragged state, I knew for certain that it had been caused by the previous blast of magic. In order to protect me from harm, Sister Carnelia had willingly used her body as a shield to absorb the brunt of the force. Now a stain of effervescing crimson blood had begun to seep through the cloths covering her breast. I swept up the artifact which had tumbled to the ground from the hole in my severed bag and tore away the wet paper which covered its surface. Then, with the cold lip of metal in my hand, I placed it atop my ornament as I gripped them both tightly together. The sound of footfall from the Jaeger Corps had by now subsided. They stood in a cluster with their swords drawn, effectively blocking any possible escape through the sluice gate. Sister Carnelia let out a shrill cry, and I, as if taking the sound to be a command to attack, unleashed the energy pent up with my ornament. The device roared, and at that instant the magic was discharged. I felt an intense wave of searing heat graze over my cheeks, and my entire body was immediately blown backwards by its powerful force. Stunned, I collapsed onto the floor. When I finally forced my eyes open, I could see Sister Carnelia standing above me with her back turned to face me. Her right arm had lost all strength of function and hung limply at her side. Dazedly, she slid to her knees and slumped onto the ground before me. I pulled Sister Carnelia to close to myself, and hugging her tightly, blasted the pack of exciting mercenaries with an instantaneous wave of magic. But then it was all over, my last stand ending as soon as it had begun. Countless razor-sharp sword tips stared down at us from all sides. Convinced I had finally reached my life's torments, I raised my hand, and while placing a false hope in my ornament that I could somehow protect it, I activated it, the last of its energy being consumed as it was drained empty. Whirling arrow blades spun around us as I closed my eyes and accepted my fate. Behind my darkened eyelids, an endless realm of whiteness began to spread out before me. A legacy never to be forgotten. I was swallowed by the light, only to be spewed moments later onto a patch of hardened ground. The air was filled with the scent of sun-baked earth. Yet for being the floor of some grandiose heavenly estate inherited by those in the afterlife, it felt quite like the flagstones I had grown accustomed to in my past life. Upon feeling around in my immediate surroundings, my searching hand found soft locks of disheveled hair. It seemed as though Sister Carnelia had come as well as I to meet her creator firsthand. Gradually as I lay there, I felt something warm swell within the pit of my stomach. Weary and spent, I just let the feeling spread over me. It was at about this time that the sound of murmurous voices started to fill the air around us. Warm breath tickled across my nose and brow, letting me know that I was being stared at directly in the face. As my eyes adjusted to the intensity of the light, I realized that I was looking into the face of a young girl who beamed back at me brightly with the widest of smiles. However, she seemed a bit young to hold the same position as the gods. The knell of a bell overhead rang out loud and clear. Strangely, it sounded exactly like the cathedral's distinctive toll. Taking in the series of events to be rather odd, I picked myself up at last, awakened from the dream which had temporarily invaded my senses. There it was, the familiar cityscape, the sounds, and even the scent of the breeze. I knew the place by heart. It was the public square of the imperial city which unfolded before the great cathedral of the Septian Church. I opened the fingers of my right hand and stared down at the metallic lump in its palm, entrusted to me by Mict. Golden filaments of light swirled across the surface of the artifact. I instantly recalled Sister Carnelia's words. "It's alive," she had said, as I watched the ancient light gradually fade away before closing my hand around its surface once more. I believed it. Supporting each other by wrapping arms around one another's shoulders, Sister Carnelia and I hobbled and limped our way toward the magnificent cathedral as the awe-inspiring figure of the goddess Adios stood silently with unfurled wings, watching us from over us from the deep-hued stained glass window above. And as for the events which followed, they were all settled in an orderly fashion. The metallic lump which Sister Carnelia had daringly risked her life for was turned over to his eminence, the Cardinal, who presided over the cathedral. Disappeared with it through the thick open door of the sacred vault. The level of corruption which had spread like a plague among the members of the imperial court, influential aristocrats, and even commissioned officers in the imperial army, astonished even those mediators acting on behalf of the Great Bracer Guild. I stayed close by Sister Carnelia as she was laid out in a pew within the chapel of the cathedral. The real sisters of the church delicately pulled off her coat and cut open her vest, now stuck to her body with dried blood. Upon doing so, they found an ornate shirt of chainmail just beneath the layer of her clothing, which for some strange reason seemed to bewilder them all. The next day, a certain aristocrat, who had hired the Jaeger Corps to carry out his selfish bidding, agreed to relinquish the artifacts in his possession in return for keeping his estate. Hence, his collection of forbidden antiques were brought under the safekeeping of the Septian Church. Sworn to secrecy, I made immediate arrangements to take leave for the Calvard Republic. My destination? A high-class resort which turned out to be an excellent way to recover physically and mentally, as well as forget about the series of events which had occurred over the past few days. Naturally, the bracelets assigned to provide my escort were none other than Clayton and Pavel, who before we left guided me without a word to where Sister Carnelia was resting. I talked with Sister Carnelia, who had awoken for a short interval, but as I got up to leave, she reached out her dainty hand and said to me, "Before you go, I want to tell you my real name. It's Ein Selnet." I took her unblemished hand in mine and gripped it firmly as I expressed my appreciation for what she had done. And today now, 3 years later, I stood staring at her name once again, but this time printed on a page of the Imperial Chronicle. Ein Selnet. Below those printed characters ran the few lines of an unembellished article. Yesterday, a corpse was discovered in an urban area of the capital just before dawn. The body was found to be covered with multiple stab wounds. The departed in life had been involved in charitable work and brought salvation to many afflicted souls in various regions throughout the land. As I read the last line, I envisioned the deceased figure of Sister Carnelia lying motionless upon a darkened street. Yet, despite the blood-stained face I envisioned in my mind, I saw her as she rested in peace, a gentle smile crossing her face, and vindicated of any transgressions in life. As I rolled up the copy of the magazine in hand, I brushed my hand lightly across the shining bracelet emblem pinned on my chest. Almost 2 years had passed since I converted to my new line of work, which Sister Carnelia had so graciously recommended to me. Finally, I had even become used to be using my real name. Toby, came the whisper of Sister Carnelia as it resurrected in my ears. Now only known as Toby, I pressed my forehead up against the cold, clouded window of the passenger car, the refulgent eyes of Sister Carnelia shining brightly like a carnelian stone, forever ingrained in my memory. In my mind's eye, I watched as her coat sleeve showed up behind her and she dashed away into the darkness of my memories. Opening my eyes, I gazed out through the window glass, and there I saw the bleeding rose-colored illumination of the Imperial City as it faded away beneath the heavy white cloud. And that is the end of the book. And that's the end of today's video. Next time, we will actually patrol Gransel. I'll see y'all then.